This episode is sponsored by Sourcing Playground. Sourcing Playground is an online platform making it easier for brands to connect with compliant, ethical, and sustainable manufacturers. Think Match.com, but for retail. You can post your project for free and let the suppliers come to you. On the platform, you can easily compare quotes and factory profiles to choose the right supplier for your brand. Sourcing Playground are offering a free upgrade to the Fashion Feed listeners, which means your project will only be viewed by the factories and hidden from public view. Go to www.sourcingplayground.com to check it out and mention the Fashion Feed in the chat box. Hello and welcome to episode 18 with Heather Williams at Sourcing Playground. I'm very excited for this episode because, as you've just heard, Sourcing Playground is the sponsor for this podcast, and I thought this makes sense to have Heather on as a guest as well. And I met Heather through LinkedIn, and she's created the most unbelievable platform with Sourcing Playground. Having been a buyer herself, she knew there was a problem in the industry through connecting manufacturers to retailers and vice versa. So after spending a fortune on travel, going to find factories, she just thought this needs to be online. In this episode, we discuss Heather's career history to date, why she launched Sourcing Playground and how you can use it to find a manufacturer for your business, the best practices when working with a factory with regards to design and communication, and we also cover the huge topic of sustainability and how Heather is going to break that down for you and make it a lot easier to be able to understand what that actually means as a term in the fashion industry. The podcast will be taking a short break over Christmas and New Year, but we'll be back in January 2020. Just want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to everybody who's listened so far, sent me a comment about it, shared it on Instagram, sent it to a friend, whatever it might be. I just want to say a massive thank you from both me and Heather as well, for enjoying the podcast this year, and I hope to bring you lots more exciting guests in 2020 as well. So here's Heather.
Computer?
Yay, it's working.
Yay, there you go. Well done.
Hopefully my internet holds out as well.
Okay, fingers crossed.
I think it should be fine. But yeah, thank you for joining me on the podcast, Heather. It's very exciting because you are the sponsor of the podcast as well.
Thanks very much. It's great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it was, I think we met in such a random way. It was like through Catherine Erdley on LinkedIn.
Yes, I reached out to Catherine and we sort of met up at SVP, and she was like, "You have to meet Elizabeth. Come and get coffee."
Yeah, and I think it's, I don't know, I feel like LinkedIn has become a little bit more of a thing recently. Well, in my world anyway, I've been trying to.
I love LinkedIn.
Yeah, well, now I love it because I found you. So for anybody who doesn't know you, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and Sourcing Playground?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Heather Williams, a founder at Sourcing Playground. I started the company just over 2 years ago now. After being, essentially, I was a buyer myself. So I was sourcing products, sourcing factories from the Far East, overseas, not in clothing, but in consumer electronics. But to be honest, once you've sort of bought and sourced different commodities, it's the sort of the same process for lots of different product categories.
Yeah, definitely.
And I basically saw just how much of a pain it is to source factories, and you know, it's just such a long process, difficult. And to be honest, how we used to find factories and source new products was to travel to different trade shows every year, and it was a very costly exercise for our company. We used to have to go 3-4 times a year, so going to China, Hong Kong, and different trade shows around the world, and it just blew me away that this wasn't possible to do online. You know, we all use platforms like Upwork and freelancer.com and, you know, these gig economy platforms that have done so well, where they match supply and demand of a certain industry or a service. So I thought, why can't this be done for product sourcing and factories? Because like most brands will know, when they go to Google, you can't really type in, I'm looking for a woven factory in Turkey, and come up with hundreds of different Google entries. They don't, suppliers unfortunately haven't caught up in the marketing sense, that they don't have online presences, they don't have websites, and if they do, often they've got limited information about them. And just to speed up this process for a brand, so we created a platform where brands come to our platform and they say, I'm looking for, let's say, 500 t-shirts or dresses, or I'm looking to have a new range of activewear. They tell us the products they're looking for, the specification, the quantities, the target unit prices, the country that they're looking to source from. And basically they start to get quotations from suppliers from our database who can supply. So brands will then start to bring in to get quotations. They'll get an introduction from the supplier, and they can just start to build up a level of understanding of who and which supplier can produce the products and at what price, and basically save them time and give them more choice on companies to work with. So rather than brands contacting individual suppliers, it's the other way around. And we just try to make this easy as possible. And one of the most important things for us is focusing on sustainability. So brands, there's a huge shift in the industry now. Doesn't anyone who's either been living under a rock for the past 2 years?
I remember when we went to Make It British, I can't remember if I told you, but we were looking for a fabric mill, and we said, oh, do you have this in organic? And she went, do you know what, everybody's asked us that. And I was like, okay, exactly. You actually have been living under a rock? And she was like, maybe next year we'll think about it. I was like, okay.
Oh, that's such a shame. It's such a huge shift now, and anything from small brands to large companies are looking out for it. So it is a shift that we need to focus on. So we basically make it easier for brands to find certified factories with either environmental or social compliance. So we just make it easier for companies to see which companies are certified and not.
Yeah, I think that's really important actually to touch on that, like the difference between environmental and social, because I have some people come to me and they say, oh, I want it to be sustainable, say. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, I don't know. And they just feel like they should say it to be a good person or something. And I'm like, no, like what's actually genuinely important to you? Is it looking after the planet? Is it looking after the people? Is it both? Is it like, what are you trying to achieve with your brand? And then that kind of aids you in who you're looking to work with.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. That's how we sort of started to see this level of interest, is that brands, when they post their project, they would just say, like you said, I'm looking for a sustainable supplier. Now, most suppliers won't know what that means, in the sense that they don't see it as I'm sustainable. They see it as I've been certified in social or environmental compliance. That's the language that they use. So could be certified to make sure that they look after their workers. So they would have been audited, they would have been checked, and they would have been past a certain standard. So usually ethical compliance, social compliance covers no child labour, freedom of association, making sure the company has proper health and safety practices in place, making sure the company is paid the minimum wage or living wage, or making sure they have proper training. So all of this encompasses into social compliance, and there is a lot of different certification standards that check them, and they often overlap each other, and they often do similar type of things, but they all cover this basis of making sure that the workers are covered. And so that's the social side. And then on the environmental side, then it's it varies quite dramatically, whether you're looking at organic cotton or whether you're trying to reduce the water used at the factory, or it covers quite a range of things. So as much as possible, we try to educate brands of what sustainability means. It's not really a word, it's sort of a generic description, but it means a lot more than just looking after the planet. There's a lot of details involved.
I know, because sustainable actually really means length of duration of time, or making it last a really long time, or making sure it last forever, I guess. But
Absolutely.
when you're talking about working with a factory, that's kind of got nothing to do with the product. It could be to do with the fact that the factory's not going to shut down because it pays people fairly and it has a healthy cash flow. I don't know. Exactly. That's got nothing to do with the planet. It's almost like an umbrella term, but like you say, you need to be using the language that factory understands. And on top of that, there's usually a language barrier as well. So just to add another fun layer of excitement, you've got that's in your way as well. So
yeah, exactly.
Just going back a minute, actually, when you were saying about working with factories and it was a really difficult process. I know you mentioned to me before that factories aren't sort of natural born marketeers. And what they're really good at is making product. Yeah. And sometimes people say, oh, I don't know, like, oh, their website's not very nice, or they're a bit abrupt on email. And what would you kind of say to people when they're looking for a factory and they find these things?
It's a good question. I would say the biggest advice we usually give brands is to sort of reset their expectation on a factory. Because it's not this level of service or dealing with a company that you're used to. It's the company usually. So in a factory, you usually is split up into two different departments. You have the workers who actually make the products in the factory, and then you have the office staff who are usually merchandisers, who are then sales they use for their sales department. So merchandisers are the staff who look after the order, and the account manager, and facilitate every single order that goes through the factory. And these merchandisers are also asked to go and find new business for the company. So these merchandisers, or essentially sales advisors or account managers, aren't necessarily trained in sales, so it's not their best skill, if I'm honest. You do have fantastic account managers at factories, but it's not their primary task. They're very, very knowledgeable, like you say, at product. So the questions that you need to be asking them are about the product and about their company. So rather than brands, when they reach out to new factories saying, okay, this is what I'm looking for, and basically putting everything what you're doing down, the first thing I would ask is ask questions to the factory. So what products do you specialize in? What companies have you worked with in the past? What certifications do you have? Have you passed any certified audits like a SMETA or a BCSI? Because obviously if a factory has worked with a large established company or high street brand or retailer, then they would have social or ethical compliance, and they would have a certified audit. Often, unfortunately, the audit is paid for by the brand, so in which case they can't share this information, but sometimes they can. So it's often worth brands asking the company credentials and what certification they have. So change the communication and the conversation about what do they do and how can they help, as opposed to what you're looking for, because often suppliers can be quite yes men, and you don't want to get stuck into talking with a factory for 3 months who have said yes, and then all of a sudden it's we can't do that, and you've just wasted your time. So try and find out more about
yes.
Yes, exactly.
yes.
Find out what they do and then see if it fits.
Yeah, that's really good advice, actually. And I'd also say when you're saying about resetting your expectations, if you are sort of launching a business, is trying to keep it to one not product type, but maybe like one category.
Absolutely.
Or fabric type, maybe, because factories tend to get divided up by fabric because they have to use different machines for different fabric. So if you were to launch a collection, like maybe just start with all jersey fabric, so like sweatshirts, joggers, t-shirts, or like all wovens, so shirts, trousers, blazers, coats. Because if you try and do a bit of both, you're going to have to pretty much double your search.
Absolutely.
Would you say?
Absolutely. If you're starting out, you want to just make the first order as easy as possible, because it won't go smoothly. It never does. And
Yeah.
I think that's another bit of advice, is that nothing goes smoothly.
Yeah.
There are problems that will come up, and this is inevitable. It's not out of the ordinary. It's just part of the process. So that's the first, when their problems do arise, don't worry, this is normal. This happens with every order. So first thing. And then as you know that there will be problems, you want to minimize that to as much as possible and reduce your risk. So like you say, trying to work with one factory, usually they're dealing with one type of fabric, like you say, woven or jersey.
Or knitwear.
Or knitwear, exactly. So try anything you can do to, speed up the process of when you've got a design and you want to get your first batch order through the door, will help you minimize your risk. And whether that's the reducing amount of product or styles, or just to basically get you to a position where that you've done this before, you know what you're doing, and now you can improve on what you've done, as opposed to trying doing too much too soon. It will cost you a lot of money, and you'll end up probably spending more time. And we often have brands saying, oh, well, I was hoping to launch now, but I'm having to launch next year because of the seasons. And it's usually because they've sort of bitten off more they can chew.
Yeah. I also find that people don't necessarily give enough detail for the factory that's needed. Like especially when they're placing an order and they say, oh, I had a sample and it was kind of how I wanted it, and I wanted to make a few changes, and so I went into production, and then it doesn't look how I wanted it to in my head, and then they're stuck with all this production. The factory thinks they've done the right thing, but actually, I mean, maybe they have messed it up, who knows, but I tend to find that it's that they, like you said, they're yes men. So if they think they've kind of got what you mean, they'll just say yes and do it to try and please you.
I think on that is this where samples come in. This is where making sure you've got enough samples at different stages is really, really important, because factories, one thing that brands often say is that, oh, I would have thought a factory would have seen that wasn't right, or I would have thought a factory would have seen that this wasn't as I'd looked at on the tech pack or on my design. And now this is open to interpretation of what a supplier or what you expect. So this should be on the responsibility of the brand. So if there's anything that you don't like, or something's not quite right, or if it doesn't match the design or the first sample that you've given, then you have to say what was wrong, how you can improve, and what you do expect. So this is where samples are really important. So you get your first sample, you see what it looks like, get your amends done, and this, usually you can do this over 2 or 3 samples. Once you've got this, you want to get your golden sample, which is once you've got to a place that this says, this, I want all of my mass production to look exactly like this garment. And this is called a golden sample, where we recommend that not only the brand, but there should be a golden sample at the factory as well. So any good factory will have a golden sample available. So they basically check mass production stock to make sure they match. And then it's not open to interpretation, because someone, a quality control manager or any part of their quality control processes, will check, hang on, this is mass production, this doesn't match the golden sample. And at this point they can then say, okay, we've had a problem, maybe there was a miscommunication. But making sure that you've got that golden sample that looks exactly what you want, and you've got a copy, the factory's got a copy. And then also, if you want to instruct a third-party inspection company to come and inspect the goods before it's shipped, then usually you would give this golden sample to the inspection company and say, look, I want to make sure that all of my mass production stock matches the golden sample. Then you've got a frame of reference. Even you can't get an auditor to check something if you've not given them something to check it against,
because it's more of their opinion rather than what it actually needs to be. Like an example of that, it was quite funny actually. We bought this vintage hat, and the stitching had come away from one side, and we sent it away saying, oh, can you just make it exactly as this? And they made it with the stitching coming away on one side because they just wanted it. So because we'd said make
exactly,
it exactly as this.
Exactly. And it's not
it
their
was quite
fault.
funny when it arrived, but yeah, it was just,
Yeah,
that
it's a really
shows
good
the how specific they are. Or like a couple of years ago, it was really fashionable to have the back of your top longer than the front of your top. And we got all these replies back from the factory saying, the back length is longer than the front, like, do you need us to mend it? And we're like, no, it's fashionable, like, don't worry. It was quite cute.
Honestly, that's good. They've taken the initiative to check.
Yeah, they have. But that, when you're saying, oh, I thought the factory would see this, it's like sometimes they do, but sometimes they will just do exactly as you ask them to because they're terrified of doing anything wrong. Like most of them are like eager to please.
Absolutely. You know, they want the order, they want you to be happy, and factories are looking for you to stay with them. You know, they don't on purpose mess it up to annoy you. It's in their benefit for you to be happy with your products and for you to stay with them.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you are placing that order, when you said you've got that gold seal sample, that you place, like maybe have a date referring to that sample as well, like the date that it was made, and like tag it, photograph it inside and out, like with all of the details, send that to the factory and just say, as per this sample dated X, everything is approved to go into production. And then say where the fabric is coming from, say when the fabric's arriving, say that this sample is fitting as a size 12 and it needs to be graded out from here or whatever. But like go so hard on the detail that it kind of feels patronizing.
Yeah, you need to outline every single point, you know. That's exactly what you're saying. And
it is sort of your responsibility as the brand to do that. And like I made a little template that I've put on my website. I think it's like just an Excel sheet, but it shows the level of detail that I kind of need to be showing them.
Yeah, definitely.
So you were saying before we started recording that when you're starting out, this whole process can feel really overwhelming. So you've introduced a service where you actually manage it for them.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Basically, we've found that on our platform, companies who have done this before and are a bit more experienced, you know, it's very self-explanatory and they're able to navigate very easily. But companies who have not done it before, it can be a little bit more challenging. So we've had people reach out to us and ask for a bit more help. So this is where we thought, okay, maybe we could offer something which we call managed service. And basically brands will come to us so we can have a consultation to find out exactly what products you're looking for, and therefore what suppliers will be most suitable for you. We would then post a project on your behalf. So our team, we've had a lot of experience with sourcing and apparel sourcing, so we know exactly what suppliers are looking for. So we'll essentially write the project based on what you're looking for and the level of information you've provided, and we will send that out to all of our factories. So again, listing the target unit costs, if you have any, the specifications of the product. We would need to have designs or tech packs available to be able to give this to our factories. That's something we can also help with as well, if that's something brands need help with. And then basically once we start to receive quotations from factories, we do all the shortlisting of factories on the brand's behalf. So, you know, we already know what the brand's looking for, so we can save them and cut out a lot of the time wasted back and forth if factories aren't, you know, complying with some of their requirements. And then basically once we've got a few factories that are suitable, then we go back to the brand and say, look, these are based on the requirements you've mentioned and all of the specifications you've given, these are the factories that we think would be suitable. And also we check for, you know, making sure their communication is right. Do we think that the brand is going to be able to work with this factory? So there's sort of soft skills that we look at, as well as the sort of commercial aspect of pricing, lead time, you know, quantities, that sort of thing. We make sure that, you know, is this a suitable supplier just to be able to work with, because some companies aren't as good as others.
Yeah, and if you're super experienced, you can sort of like brush over
exactly
the fact that the conversation's not going to flow very freely or whatever it might be. But if you're starting out, like, you need them to be
exactly.
Like,
they need to be experienced working
fluent
with newer companies anyway. So we'll make sure of that, and then we'll present the options back to the brand. And at this point, if they're interested, then we would just take a small finder's fee and a commission on the first order. But then we're there to sort of support the brand if needed, and we just work at sort of a matchmaking service where we just, brands can still use our platform as a self-service. You can use the platform for free, but we just find brands get more out of it if we're able to go through and just take the sort of pain out of them contacting factories who aren't necessarily relevant.
Yeah. And would you say that it's maybe not worth uploading a project or approaching a manufacturer until you've got a design spec or a tech pack?
Absolutely, 1000%.
Yeah.
So basically, factories work on, they're more visual than they are let's say descriptive, let's say. So you could send a long essay saying, I'm looking for a product that looks and feels a bit like this, and this doesn't work with a factory. I would say don't bother. Brands who are looking to do this for the first time, you want to get yourself a designer that's going to create a tech pack or a design if you're in the design stages, that basically tells the factory exactly what you're looking for. Now that's down to the stitching, the buttons, the logo placement, everything. It is an instruction manual that says to a factory, this is how you make a product. So when you give,
and it's not a fashion illustration, it's like a different thing. It's like, it's not that pretty, really.
No, it's
like you say, it's an
drawing.
instructional manual.
Yeah, it's an instruction manual with a picture, a line drawing, usually with illustrated, okay, this is where the button goes, or this stitch needs to go here. It's an instruction manual, not a fancy trend document where
like a Christian Dior beautiful.
No, it doesn't need to be pretty. And
no,
there are professionals out there who are very, very good at their job, who make them, they're used to making instruction manuals and tech packs for suppliers. So it's not necessarily how it looks, but it's the instructions you give them about how the product is made, which is very different. Because as soon as a supplier can see this, they can give you accurate costings. Because if you just show them a picture that you found on Amazon or from on Google and say, please, can you make this? It gives them no information about the details of the product. So therefore, any cost that you're going to get is not going to be accurate. So what we find is brands will send them a design, say, oh, look, I'm looking for something like this. They start making it and the supplier will give them a cost. Okay, then 3 months later, once you've gone through all the samples, because the original sample they sent wasn't matching because you didn't give them enough requirements in the detail, and then you find out, oh, hang on, the price has gone up or down. Now this is because from the outset they weren't able to properly cost it because they didn't know how to make the garment. So it, in every way you flip it, it saves time and money by getting a professional tech pack made, and there is no way around it. Unfortunately, at the moment, this is the best way that we've been able to find to instruct a supplier to say, I would like this product to be made.
Yeah, because in a lot of ways, like, the fashion industry is quite old-fashioned.
Yes,
it's not really moved on that much. Like, I used to work for a supplier, and he was turning over like millions, and he didn't have a website because he didn't need one.
Me too. Yeah, you don't.
No, and like, it was all word of mouth business, and that was what he did, and like, you would never have been able to find him. And I don't know, like, I think what you said at the very, very beginning about resetting your expectations, that definitely rings true. It's not like the service that you'd get in a restaurant, for example.
No.
And like you say, with the tech pack, and you're sending a big long email like, oh, I want this burgundy jumper and it's kind of got this sleeve but a little bit of a wider neck.
No,
and if you were Chinese and you were reading that, your interpretation would be different of it anyway. So all they need is a line drawing with arrows and numbers, and regardless of where you are in the world, everybody will be able to understand that.
Precisely.
So I think, yes, it might cost you a couple of £100 to get some tech packs made, but like, your biggest investment when you're starting out is going to be your stock. So you kind of want to protect that at all costs by giving it a best chance from the beginning.
And to be honest, that money you'll save 10 times back if you get the products wrong, or the time wasted on getting numerous amount of samples, because suppliers are happy to send you a couple of free samples, but if the product is wrong and you're not getting it right, then obviously then they'll need to pay for samples at some point, and shipping costs. So if you get a proper tech pack done and supplier is able to reduce the amount of samples you're making, then great, you've probably saved a couple of $100 on shipping the few wrong samples back and forth. So just trying to get it right from the beginning is sort of your goal, and that will be done by a professional tech pack that's being made by someone that's done this hundreds of times.
And it also shows to the factory that even if you don't know what you're doing, that you can kind of pretend that you know what you're doing if you've got a tech pack, because it shows that you're working in the way that they need you to work, rather than sending like that long email that you sort of mentioned.
Definitely. And we found actually that some problems arise not just from suppliers, but also the inexperience from brands. So it is just as much as a risk being inexperienced as it is a supplier, potentially messing up your order. So, there is a level of responsibility for the brand to go and do your research and do your homework. And that's part of that is having a document that instructs your factory on how to make the product. That's the first thing. But it also helps to educate the brand of how to make the product. What fabrics do you use? What stitching? You need to know your product inside out. So there's a responsibility to learn as much as possible. This is their world, and they make the products, and they're very, very good at that. So it is the responsibility of the brand to sort of learn how they do that. And I suppose rather than getting factories to change to what we want, is that I think there is a level of compromise on both sides. There is
I agree with that.
Brands can also compromise to find out how they would like it done, and what information does a supplier need from me, and how can I make their job as easy as possible so my products come out as beautiful as they can.
And like when I was saying before that I used to work at a supplier, the best buyer that you could work with is somebody who knew what they were doing, for one. But in that sense, like, they could make quick decisions, and they were very confident in their decision making, and that makes a factory's life so much easier when because obviously we met at that fashion SVP, and I don't know if anybody has ever been to that event, but you walk in and it's a little bit flat. There's no party going on, it's not that pretty. It's not that shiny, and it's not, I don't know, it's because what you said is they don't know how to market themselves. All they know is product. So it's your responsibility to get creative and take their product and put your spin on it. Like, all they want to be able to do is take your direction in what your vision is. So it is quite a good idea to go to an event like Fashion SVP, just so that you can see what you're working with, I guess.
Very true.
I think if you're new to the industry and you kind of come in, you're like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. Like, it is fun, but the behind the scenes stuff isn't necessarily that sexy.
No.
So the other thing you were mentioning as well is that you've introduced a new questionnaire on your website about, well, it's coming. I say you're introducing it.
Yes.
Let's speak about that. So when we were saying earlier about sustainability being a little bit of a grey word, you're going to try and introduce some, what kind of word would you use? Some like certification maybe with regards to that?
Exactly how we say it, is that a lot of brands have come to us and said they want to be more sustainable, and they really do want to try, and they're looking at their production or their products or the materials, and they're trying to say, okay, how can I make this? How can I reduce my impact on the products I make? And we love this shift in the mentality of both smaller brands to larger brands. It's needed, and also consumers are asking for it. But the thing that is lacking is what does this mean? What does sustainability mean? And how can that translate into the products you make? So what we've done, we're going to be launching in the new year the Better Brand Questionnaire, which is pretty much a sustainability questionnaire that covers 5 different topics. And it's essentially covering topics like transparency, traceability, labor, environment, raw materials, and leadership. And it's an online questionnaire that we ask brands to fill out. And it essentially allows us to understand how sustainable that brand is, covering those different topics. And it allows a brand to assess their current impact. Okay, how am I scoring? So we score out of 100, so brands can see where they are. We then produce a report, and if brands pass, they get a certificate and a badge, and they're listed on our website. We basically, in the report, we help to offer suggestions on where they can improve on their sustainability. So, for instance, the materials they are using, could they be swapped for materials that have less impact? Or is the company, most companies have a code of conduct, or making sure that the labor rights are covered, but we go a lot deeper in getting everything to be checked and verified with evidence. So we basically collaborated with a company called Remake, who, if no one's had a look, have a look. They're a fantastic company that basically try to promote more sustainable brands to end consumers, for them to be able to shop more responsibly. And together we've collaborated on using their criteria, and we've also built upon the criteria that they have. And basically through the questionnaire, are able to basically benchmark the brands in where they are and to highlight where they can improve, because up until now there isn't a sort of a guideline to say this is your roadmap to being more sustainable and this is what you should look at. So by asking the questions to a brand, it makes you realize, oh, I didn't think about that, hang on, maybe I can look at that. Or it just allows them to realize the different topics that they can be looking at, and how they could look at reducing their impact. So that's the first thing. And then obviously the companies who are actually a lot more sustainable, so we've started to pilot this with a few brands who are honestly doing some fantastic things, and they've really done their research and they know what they're doing, but everyone can improve, so they're always looking at ways of improving. But for these companies who are let's say at the forefront of sustainability, then we offer them recognition. So it's a very noisy market right now, and as soon as you say the word sustainable, you're competing with the likes of the big guys who have huge marketing and PR departments. So you don't want to get bogged down into, okay, how do we know who's more sustainable than others? So for the smaller companies who may not be able to compete but are doing amazing things, then we provide a level of like an independent assessment, essentially, because they can say, look, we've been assessed and we've gone through the Better Brand Questionnaire and we've come out at this percentage, or we are 1 to 5 star rated. And it's a way for them to be able to promote how fantastic their brand is to end consumers. Because
it gives them something to shout about as well. Like, everyone needs some content to share on Instagram, and that's a lovely thing to share.
Yeah, and basically we've started to see this started being a bit of a kickback on sustainable, because people who are saying they're sustainable aren't necessarily that sustainable, and therefore brands and consumers are starting to become a bit more they want to it's suspicious, and they want to check to make sure that what a brand is saying is true, essentially. So this way is that it also provides, let's say, a way of checking your communication is correct, basically. If you're saying you're sustainable and actually comparatively to other companies you're not, then maybe it's worth you altering how you communicate with your end consumers. But then this at least will give you a benchmark. So our scoring system is, as I said, is based out of 100. And if brands pass, then they have, depending on the percentage they have, it'll either be a 1 to 5 star, 5 star obviously being the highest, and we'll give them a certification and a badge that they can use, and that's updated once every year, because obviously things changed so much with brands, it's good for us to keep in contact to see what they're doing. And yeah, we've had a lot of great feedback so far. Most of the comments back from us is brands said, oh, I didn't even realize that was as important, or it made me realize and highlight all of the different areas that we could look into that we hadn't. And it just
things that they are doing that they take for granted, and it's like,
exactly.
oh, actually we can be shouting about that because other people don't necessarily do it.
Precisely. And I think it's important for us, the user base that we have is growing more and more conscious of sustainability, but they're not necessarily sure how to do that. So we've basically cross-referenced how we've come up with our assessment and how we've created the criteria. As I said, we've worked with a company called Remake is the first thing, but also we've cross-referenced everything to certification. So when we ask about labour questions, so how do we know that you're looking after your workers' rights and the protection and health and safety and all of these things, we ask for evidence and references. So it's not enough for brands to just say, okay, well, we do that. We need to be able to check this information. And usually this is done by certification. So if you work with a certified factory, then great, show us this information, and then we can check this. So we've cross-referenced all of the certification out there that you can verify. So that is anything from WRAP or the World Fair Trade Organization, or GOTS, Global Organic Textile Standard, or SA1000, or there's loads and loads of different certification standards that we've basically mapped out, and we know exactly what they check. So if someone tells us, okay, I work with a GOTS factory and here's my audit and here's the certificate, then we know exactly what has been checked at the factory.
Yeah.
So we rely on these certification standards to basically check as evidence for all the questions that we ask. On most of the questions, not every question is not always relevant, but where possible, we ask for links to companies' websites or code of conducts or presentations or anything, or certification standards that we can check as evidence, because whilst we would need to ask brands this information, there is a level of responsibility that we need to check to make sure everything that they're saying is true, accurate, and up to date, basically.
Yeah, I think it's that transparency thing is just going to be so huge for 2020. And I was saying on this IGTV video that I did the other day, and on Gusto, that food delivery app, and they sent a bag of like I don't know, it just had little bits in it, but it said that they're 50% towards their goal of being plastic free. They're nowhere near it, but they're working towards it. And I really respected it, because it was saying, they're not saying that they're perfect. Like, I think there's a bit of an air at the moment that if you say the word sustainable, you've got to be impeccable.
100%.
But actually, if you are really honest and transparent with your audience, I feel like they would respect you a whole lot more. So it's not that you have to do everything, but you have to tell them everything, regardless of whether it's good or not. And
absolutely. That's actually one of the sections in our questionnaire. We ask for how much information do you provide on your brand, disclosing information about your factories or the conditions of your factories, or do you disclose information of areas of improvement for your brand? Like, that's exactly a good example, is that yes, we've put a target as this. In the last 2 years, we might have improved on our score by 10%, but we're going in the right direction. So that's what consumers want. It's so important.
It's just a way to gain respect and trust and honesty as well with your customer, which is pretty much the aim of the game when you're selling. It's like, once you've got their trust and you make nice product, you're 90% of the way there.
Exactly.
And when it comes to the factory side of things and getting certifications with them, if you're just completely bewildered by it all, is there certain things that you should just make, like real basic tick box things that you should look out for?
Yes. What we find is that companies who are certified are usually larger companies, because it's quite a big investment for a factory to be certified.
Yeah.
They can cost thousands of dollars easily, upwards. And if you're a factory with 3 or 4, then it's, you're looking at a company that spent over $10,000 to be certified. So in this cases, some of these certified factories aren't necessarily suited for smaller companies, because they will need higher minimum order quantities.
Yeah.
So in this case, what we would suggest is that brands need to make sure that the factory is being audited at least. So an audit is not to a specific standard. It's not like they're checking against, an organic standard that says it has to pass these things for it to pass this audit. And factory audit is they just go and it's like a snapshot. They basically report what is the current status of that factory, and they report back with an audit. Sometimes they have some sort of scoring system. They say red, amber, green, or they have some sort of grading system that shows how good they are, at least. But then at least you know what information and what checks are in place at the factory. I think that's really important. So certification
things like no children working there, no fire exits are blocked, like just really basic health and safety things is like a good start.
Yeah, and you can have these audits. So you can have, let's say, they call certified audits, and I would say that's the next tier. So certified audits being, there's one called BCSI, and there's also one called SMETA, which is SMETA, and they both cover ethical and social compliance, and they also have things about the actual factory and the quality control standards, health and safety as well. So that would be the next thing I would suggest to look for. Some of the factories already have these audits, so you just need to ask, because often they don't tell you that they have them, and they ask and they say, yeah, we do have them.
And then check that they're in date as well.
Yeah, so that's actually something that we do on our platform, is that factories sometimes, unfortunately, this is the reality in the industry. In some countries and some places, people can fraudulently make these certificates. Sometimes they can be even bought, so this is a huge sort of grey area that we're aware of. So what we do is that we work with certification standards, like the World Fair Trade Organization, like GOTS, Textile Exchange, and some of the other big companies. And we basically cross-reference our factory list with their data that they have, so their certified factory list, to make sure the factories have a proper certificate. It's not something that they bought, so it's in date and it's actually for that company. Because that's where a lot of new brands can get caught out, is that they ask for the certificate, they send it, but it might be for a factory up the road that's not theirs. And therefore it becomes, okay, how do we know this certificate is right? So we can help with that. And then moving on from the certification is you can have sort of like mini inspections. So you can pay a couple of $100 for usually that, like, supplier qualification audits. It's just like a different type of audit. It does get quite confusing. You just need to go to an audit or an inspection company, and there's lots of different companies out there, and you just need to sort of get them to do an on-site audit of the factory to see what the standard is like and whether that's something that you're happy to accept. But yeah, it's critical that you know what the factory looks like. So if you haven't gone to see them, then you need to make sure they either have certification or you've audited them.
Yeah, I think going to travel to see them is also just like a really nice thing to do. One for yourself, one for them, one for your business and your brand and your content and your website, to be able to show that. And usually, on the whole, factories are really proud of what they've achieved. So when you ask to go over there and show an interest in what they've done, they're more than happy to have you over, and they'll host you. They'll put a lovely platter of biscuits out. But then if they say, oh, no, we can't have you here, that should pretty much sort of start ringing alarm bells to begin with anyway.
Definitely.
Like, you want them to host you and for you to go over there, and like you said at the beginning, they want you to build a long-standing relationship together, so to meet in real life, and that's a nice way to show respect to them. And I know for a fact, after trips, I've always got better prices. I always get my samples quicker, because if you can get on a really good relationship with them, you become like a little favorite of theirs. Even if your orders are smaller, it doesn't matter, because you've built that human relationship up with them and taken the time out.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, I think that was all my questions for you. If there's anything else that you wanted to share about the platform, or would you say that's it?
No, I think that's it. I think we've gone through everything.
Yeah, and I'm sure you keep adding amazing things to this website, so maybe we'll do another one like this time next year and see what else you've added to it.
Definitely. I mean, we're always open to all of our additions, and product launches are based on people's feedback. So we're more than happy if people use it, you have any other feedback, or you tell us this is great or this you want to be improved, please tell us. We're open to your suggestions. We want to make it as valuable to you as possible.
Yeah, you're really good at that, actually, like listening to people's feedback, and like you're always on that chat box with Fred as well, who you do it with. So if you do get stuff on there, like just jump on it, and somebody will be able to help you. And are you going to sort of any events this year or next year? I'm like getting confused in 2020.
I'm speaking at Aventex in Paris, which is a fabric sourcing event. That's in February. What else are we doing? My mind's gone blank now. We probably will be going to SVP this year again. I know that's in February, I believe. But yeah, I can't remember the dates, but we'll probably be going. It's quite a good event to go to. And yeah, I think that's it for now.
Okay, cool. And then people can obviously find you on your website. Do you want to give everybody like your social handles on your website?
Yeah, sure. It's sourcingplayground.com. That's our website. And Facebook is Sourcing Playground. We're on Twitter at sourcingpg. And we're on LinkedIn, Sourcing Playground as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's so informative. Like, I need to get some links from you to add into the show notes as well, so people can go and investigate some more. But yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for sponsoring the podcast as well. I'm sure people have found it very useful.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
See you later.